Jerry was the best of the best.
Probably one of the smoothest and safety conscious linemen I've ever worked around.
He was kind of always like a teacher type, but also like a real friend type.
And I don't think there was any question that Jerry Kinney was probably as talented, if not the most talented outside employee we had here at Wayne White.
I'd been with the co-op actually about 18 years, probably, just right after when my accident happened. And I was actually at the time, had probably been a foreman for 2 or 3 of those years. My wife Denise also works here.
I've been here for 17 years, and I work in the records department, and I have other additional responsibilities along with the meter data management that they just implemented a few years ago.
It was July 16th of 2015. It was a Thursday, and you know, I got up that day thinking it was just going to be another day. In our line of work, it was going to be an easy day. A lot of it was cleanup from a storm that we'd had maybe a week or two before. We'd put the phase up and left the neutral down because it was in private right-of-way, and we was going to have to climb a pole to get it back up on it.
We went over this job probably 2 or 3 different times before we started it, and which makes it really kind of even that much more strange, I guess. I don't know how else to put it, because, and Jerry was the one that led the meeting. He would be in charge that day.
We had kind of a road crossing, you know, that we needed to, we kind of set up a truck there with our lights on and stuff, you know, and left a guy there, you know, to, when we got ready to pull the wire up and stuff, you know. And I basically set up my truck probably 40 feet away from a transformer pole, but also set up there so I could kind of look down over a hill to see the guy that was climbing the pole, so we could signal each other, you know, on getting the wire up and stuff like that. And there was a bunch of brush just immediately to my right, where I kind of had to, you know, lean in just a little bit to see him.
I was one span away. I had to climb the pole. We had that neutral down through the right-of-way, and I had to climb the pole to tie it back in.
We got the wire all laid out, and he climbed up the pole and got the neutral laid up in the spool, and then I proceeded to pull it up there at mid-span, and I got it pulled up and then had it caught in a hoist, and I hollered at him to see how his span was on his side, and he'd said it needed to come up just a little bit, so I gave it a couple clicks, looked back down there, and he said it looked good, and I gave him a sign of like this to tie it in, and the next thing I know is I was a little confused because I had a vision of me timing a brand new line, but I was in front of a super huge white structure that was very bright, and that was confusing me. I couldn't decide what it was, or, you know, for a minute maybe even where I was. So at that point I didn't even know I'd got into anything yet. I reached down to grab the handle of the bucket to move it, and I could not make this hand do anything. And I was getting a little frustrated on why it wasn't doing anything, so I got this hand off and put my left hand over there on it, and I still could not make it move. And I was getting really frustrated on why I couldn't make my hands move. And I was wearing long sleeve shirts, and kind of right between my leather glove and my long sleeve shirt, I could see the color of my skin, and it was discolored badly. And I barely, right after I seen that, well, then that's when the pain started coming up both my arms, and it was horrendous.
And I couldn't see him from where I was at, and I backed up, kind of up the hill, and then I seen the top of his hat on the bucket.
His head, we thought his head was kind of turned away a little bit, like he might be calling one of us on the phone, is kind of the first thing that we thought of. But pretty much a second or two after that, we knew that that was not the case.
And that's kind of when we realized something was wrong. And so Jason went over to see what was going on with Jerry.
I hollered at them guys, and we hollered at him and couldn't get a response, so I started running up there then, and then couldn't really tell, so we started getting the bucket down.
We pulled him out of the bucket, and I could see underneath his gloves that he was red, like burnt. And that's when it realized what had happened.
Phone service wasn't good, so I left a call for help. Just up the road, I could get reception, so I called the boss and told him we needed some help, and then got back and realized it was pretty serious, so went back and called for the helicopter then.
At 11 o'clock, I answered the phone, and it was a close friend, and she said, "Which one of the linemen got hurt?" And I said, "I hadn't heard." And she said, "Yeah, they've called air evac." So I immediately went to the engineering department to ask them which crew was in the helm area. I just don't think they were ready for me yet to find out so quickly. And I asked Aaron, I said, "What happened?" And he said, "He came in contact." And I said, "Who?" And he said, "Jerry." Well, we have several Jerrys here, but Jerry's the only lineman. I said, "My Jerry?" And he said, "Yes, you're Jerry."
When I was laying there on the ground talking to them guys, I told them right then, I said, I know I'm going to lose my hands. I just knew it.
It was very obvious he was in a lot of pain. And yeah, he would express he was hurting really bad. He kept saying he needed a pain shot.
And so they got me, as stabilized as they could, blood pressure and stuff, and got me down to the road to where the helicopter could land, and then picked me up down there. And I said, "Whatever you do, tell them to take me to the best burn unit there is." And I believe Air-Evac did. They took me to Mercy there in St. Louis.
He stayed conscious the whole time, and it was it was amazing for what he was going through. I mean,
I was conscious, and I was mad because, I couldn't believe I allowed that to happen. I just could not believe it. I can remember looking out, and I know talking to the guys a little bit on the helicopter a little bit. There was like a covered walkway that you go from the helicopter into the hospital. As soon as I was laying there, and as soon as I seen that covering of that walkway, I closed my eyes, and that was the last thing I remembered for probably a couple weeks.
The day that I got the phone call that the accident had happened, the last person that you could ever think that would be involved in an accident would be Jerry. I mean, the first thing is, your heart drops because you don't want to get a phone call that any accident has happened, doesn't matter what the co-op, let alone the co-op where I came from.
But on the way to Mercy Hospital, the doctors called me and wanted to know if I was en route, and I said yes. And they said they just wanted to make sure I understood the severity of Jerry's injuries, that both of his hands were extremely burned. And I said, "You don't need to say any more. I'm in the business." I knew then he was going to lose his hands.
They told me that he was in stable condition, that he had been life flighted, but you certainly are doing your fair share of prayers as you're going down the road, trying to just cope with what you've just been told.
I think the thing that probably saved me is the circular motion. It just brushed it and I was right off of it. Where if it probably got stuck or hung up there, why, I probably wouldn't be here today. And it's still fortunate that I am here because it did enter my right hand and come out my left hand, so it crossed my heart. One of the miracle things was that the Air-Evac helicopter had already taken off and cleared the building and was headed to a fireman's funeral when they got the call, and could immediately divert straight to my location, which, that's phenomenal. That saved 5-10 minutes, and that don't sound like much, but 5 or 10 minutes probably saved more length on my arms.
When I got there, they immediately took us to the waiting room for surgery because they took him in for surgery. And they did a fasciotomy on each arm, and that's basically where they just cut them both open to allow them to swell, because electricity causes compartment syndrome. So for 3 days, they were wrapped, but they had to let the swelling, do what it was going to do to see how much damage they were going to, the extent of it, before they did the amputation of the hand.
My wife said, the hardest thing that she's ever had to do in her life is sign a release to doctors to have them remove my hands. She said that was the hardest thing she's ever, she knew they had to go. You know, you could tell they was black and everything, but she said that's the hardest thing she's ever had to do is to actually sign a paper saying that it was okay to, you know, remove my hands.
And then he had 8 revision surgeries over that 5-week time frame that he was in the Mercy Burn unit because the electricity continues to burn.
At first, they thought I was probably going to lose this arm above my elbow, and they had a wound pump on it and a few surgeries, and was able to save this arm down to probably about right in there. And there was, it was probably 2 to 3 weeks after my accident. You probably can't see it, but there's a scar right here in my armpit, and they thought they had everything, and then this blew open 2 to 3 weeks later, and my wife said it was big enough that you could put an egg in.
Just the helplessness and the, you know, the surgery going there and, you know, just every surgery they take a little more off, and it was just, and, you know, seeing Denise go through all that and his family, and it, you know, it was tough.
You hear all in safety meetings, you see all these pictures, but you don't ever really put it into perspective, I guess, until you're there in that situation. And everybody at the co-op it was just different.
Unless you've had trauma worse, will be one of the hardest things you've ever done in your life. The mental part of it is probably just as hard or harder than the physical part of it, because it's hard to, my biggest problem was me, you know, why did I allow that accident to happen? I'll be honest, there's some days that I thought, why didn't you just take me so I wouldn't have to go through all this? So I wouldn't have to go through all the pain and the, you know, because, I mean, you can't describe to somebody the pain that you have. Upper amputees are a pretty small percentage. To be a double amputee is like, you know, just 2%, you know, real low percentage. To use myoelectrics, why they actually are using muscles in my forearm to trigger that, and my therapist knew that, and I mean, we worked them muscles, you know, so that I'd be prepared for when I put on my prosthetics.
The hardest part for me when we came home was watching him struggle. Just the simplest task of trying to get something out of the refrigerator. I mean, you don't realize how precious your hands are. And Jerry is one of these people that he's going to do it or he is going to die trying, and you might as well stand back and let him go.
Now they have redone my shower, and so now I can take a shower by myself. It has like sponges on the wall, you know, with a shower head on it that keeps them wet, and then the soap dispenser for them, you know, that I can use to do my back and stuff at home. And we've got all of our, she's put all the food and stuff into containers that's got a big lip on the edge of them that I can put right against the edge of a counter and pop the lid off. And to be honest, we've got our house set up so nice that most of the time when I'm at home, I'd just soon have my limbs off because I can do about everything I want to do without them. But one of the biggest things that you really take for granted is your sense of feel. You know, even though I can pick stuff up with my hand and stuff, you know, I have to physically watch myself pick something up. You know, I can't just feel for it and pick it up. I got to watch it. And feeling is such a big thing that you just don't even think of at all. You know, even today, I still have a lot of, they call it like residual limb pain or whatever, because I still feel like my hands, I still feel each individual finger. And, you know, but then my hands are always in a state of feeling like they're being stung maybe by bees or something. You know, just constantly, that never goes away.
With a tragedy of this magnitude, if you don't have support of family and friends, I don't know how people can make it through something so horrific.
A really good example of how this co-op is when I made it back from the Mercy burn unit, and then I spent 2 weeks in Mercy Rehab Hospital. And when I made it back home, for 6 weeks, every night, somebody from this co-op brought out supper. For 6 weeks. Having a lot of community support, family support, church support, friends, company support. You know, that was all in many, many things that kept me motivated to be, you know, to get to where I wanted. Because they've put so much time and effort and prayer in for me to getting better. The least I can do is try as hard as I can to make that happen.
There's always a risk, you know, out there, and it is just so critical that all the employees can stay focused all the time on what they're doing, and that is harder and harder today.
It was such the simplest thing that caused this accident. You know, a lot of people have asked why I didn't have rubber gloves on doing this. I would always put rubbers on when you was under a three-phase doing a neutral or under a transmission doing a neutral. But on single phase, it was just a common practice that, you know, I'd witnessed and done for years and years. I knew that next day I was going to be off for 10 days, you know, and my wife and I we love riding four-wheelers, and we already had reservations made for a cabin because we ride in West Virginia a lot, the Hatfield-McCoy trails. So, you know, it's kind of thinking, man, it's going to be an easy day, and then tomorrow I'll start my 10 days off, you know.
If you've had a bad day or what else is on your mind when you leave the house, it just waits for you to let your guard down one time.
You think of all the jobs you've done, you know, that you would consider super dangerous, you know, changing out a buck arm corner, you know, follow cover, you know. But I think in a situation like that, your mind capacity is on the danger of it, and you do cover and you do extra steps, you know. Where I was in a situation where I didn't think much about it and become unaware of where I was, you know, to let this happen. Always be aware, you know, and that sounds like such a simple statement. You know, always be aware of where you're at, you know. Because, I mean, I probably was just a few inches of where I shouldn't have been, you know. That was too many inches, you know. And just because I became unaware of where I was. Don't ever think that yeah, I'm close, but, you know, I think I'm good. You know, don't always take the extra precaution. It's just sometimes in our nature to, let's get it done. You know, go on to the next, you know, let's get this done and go on. It's the nature of a lot of linemen.
That brought it home to me that if it could happen to Jerry, it really could happen to anyone. You just need to be aware of your surroundings and paying attention to what you're doing.
There's a million different things that you can be thinking of when we're all out there doing these hazardous jobs, and you have to be focused 110% of the time, because it's when you're not that those little things, those moments where you're not 100% aware of what's going on, that unfortunately can be the difference between life and death, or whether or not you're permanently injured.
It was a job that I loved to go to work every day.
A phone call would come in at 2 o'clock, storm. I mean, his feet would be on the ground and be dressed and out the door before you could hardly blink an eye.
Just the thrill of throwing in a fuse or a breaker or something, seeing the whole countryside light up is just phenomenal. You know, it showed your payoff after a lot of hard work sometimes, and I don't know how it could be much more rewarding.